All right, parents, here we go again. It's the Ask Dr. Tony episode. This is the Experience Miracles podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, an expert in pediatrics, neurodevelopmental disorders, and drug-free, nervous system-focused healthcare. On this weekly episode, I'll be addressing the top questions on every parent's mind. If there's one thing we love and welcome, it's parents who never stop learning, asking the hard questions, and advocating for your kiddos like none other. So get ready for some real talk, real-life clinical and parenting experience, and real easy to understand answers that will help your family take action and get to that next level of health and healing. You ask, I answer. Let's dive into today's episode. With this episode, towards the middle of the week, Wednesdays, Thursdays, one of those 2 days, I love to jump on live and I love to hear live, and then we roll it into the podcast. I love to answer your questions. And this question, or this live, this real conversation here, this episode is going to be all about tongue ties, oral ties, TOTs, whatever kind of frame of terminology you want to put it into. This is very much a topic of today. If you've got little ones, if you've got infants, and actually, no matter the age of your kiddo, once you get moving down the road that, definitely folks that operate like I do, we're down these roads, let's call it that actually, and get into this functional, holistic, natural health world where we're actually looking for the root cause of our child's challenges. And especially it's in the nervous system world. So if it's sensory, spectrum, so neurological, stress, tension, dysregulation sort of disorders. Anyways, the tongue tie conversation is not just for brand new moms and dads who've got brand new babies, who maybe these tongue and oral ties are getting in the way of breastfeeding, getting in the way of the tongue and the swallowing and the reflexes that control digestion and assimilation. And if they're not working, can cause difficulty nursing, can cause colic, can cause reflux. So the tongue tie conversation is a very popular one today, I'm going to call it. And it's actually super popular within my profession. There's a lot of different certifications and seminars and professionals out there who are brilliant and share the same initials that I do, who make a very big deal out of tongue ties and oral ties. And there's also a ton of really great science as to they are a big deal. There's a lot going on with them, and we're going to cover that science. As always, we're going to get into it. We're going to get granular. We're going to get detailed. But as always, you probably guessed it. If you've listened to one single episode or kind of messed around with our platform at all, we're going to go deeper. There is more to the story for sure with tongue and oral ties than most parents are being told, including those if you've had a revision. Now, I actually want to walk that one out a little bit. Not only if you've already had the surgery, had the revision, and however they did it. I'm not going to get in, I'm going to go detailed today with tongue ties, but I'm not going to necessarily go into the different ways that dentists or those address these things. I know there's some that are a bit more aggressive and some that are a bit less aggressive, but I'm not a pediatric dentist, so I'm not going to speak to the treatment options of doing it. I'm going to speak to why are so many parents being told their child has tongue ties and need to have a corrective revision. Why are, let's play this out, if that's accurate, and this many kids, this higher percentage of kids are having all these issues with latching. And then later on, by the way, these tongue tie issues are very connected to sensory challenges, sympathetic dominance, airway and breathing and respiration challenges, tension on the nervous system. So this is a perfect storm, vicious cycle conversation, because what you're going to learn today is what no one else teaches you about tongue ties is there's actually something very deep going on within the nervous system, not just within the tissues. It's not just a mechanical issue. It's not just a soft tissue issue. It's not just a ligamentous issue. And that's why what I'm saying there a minute ago is I really, really want even parents who have had their child's tongue, oral, buccal ties revised, had the surgery, what a lot of parents get is an awesome boost forward. Things do get easier with latching and breathing, and a lot of improvement can come from these revisions. But a lot of times it can be misleading if you don't really understand, and most practitioners, most dentists, most pediatric chiropractors even don't know the science as deep as I'm going to take you today. And so if you don't see it all the way through to its foundational root cause, What happens so often today, this is the best analogy and comp I can give you, and it's dead on accurate. And I've been in practice for almost 20 years, so I've seen these trends, I've seen these changes, I've seen stuff kind of come into the lexicon and say, that's a big deal. And right now, rightfully so, the microbiome, neuroinflammation, tongue ties, and then primitive reflexes, those are four of the biggest conversations in this natural health, pediatric, perfect storm, sensory, colic spectrum world, and they should be, but they all have something more going on than most people are telling you. And so the best comp I can give you, if you're a family who awesomely, to be celebrated, has seen an awesome improvement with your child right after having the tongue tie revised, is it's a lot like ear tube surgery for ear infections. Every single family I've met, and I've met thousands of them, we with natural health and chiropractic, the way we do things, ear infections, sinus infections, respiratory infections, like what we call kick the sick or chronic congested immune system kids, that's honestly one of the easiest things for us to take care of. The fact that, kids still get antibiotics and corticosteroids and ear tube surgeries and their tonsils and adenoids, it's disheartening. It's so frustrating because there's just so many effective things, starting with chiropractic. But in that conversation, in that frame, what'll happen when a child has these chronic ear infections, congestion, the fluid can't drain, the pediatrician refers them to the ENT takes the drill out, puts the eustachian tubes in, there's always about a 6 week to 6 month, depending upon the level of actual nervous system dysfunction that didn't get addressed by the surgery and no one else told the family about yet. There's always a 6 week to 6 month, sometimes longer, huge improvement in ear function after the ear tubes are put in. And then a few weeks, a few months later, the problem returns or the problem moves. You drill a hole in the ear, you get congestion out of the ear, but you shove it into the throat, and now that child has airway issues, strep infections. Then they lop out the tonsils and you go back to the same ENT after another 6 rounds of antibiotics for strep and RSV and croup. Go back to the same ENT. Well, guess what? Oh, the tonsils, the adenoids are too big and inflamed. Let's just take those out. So now the fluid can't get stuck in the ear. It can't get stuck in the throat. So now that kid gets asthma. Now that kid has bronchitis. Now that kid gets walking pneumonia every single season. Now that kid is a chest respiratory issue because all that medicine does is move the problem, not solve the problem. Now, you may think that's a heck of a harsh comp and comparison for tongue ties, but I'm telling you, when that soft tissue and ligament is that tight and that ticked off, and I get it. When you look at it, you can see it. When you examine this is what we do. I'm a pediatric chiropractor. We know how to find these things, but we also know how to look deeper because the tongue tie issue, the tension on the tissues is the superficial, easier to be seen, easier to be revised and clipped, part of the problem, but it's not the foundation of the problem. So what we have now seen over the last 5 to 10 years, as tongue tie revisions have become so much more popular, is a very similar playbook as to how it plays out for these infants and kids. And a lot of times people in the sensory spectrum world will learn about this, and the even older kiddos will get these clipped. I've heard of and had patients as adults and teens who are going and saying, oh, that's it. And what happens is there's a momentary reprieve for the nervous system. There's a momentary literal improvement. It's a biomechanical, soft tissue, structural improvement in the airway. It's an absolute improvement. And just in case you don't pick this up throughout this whole episode, there are many of these that have gotten so bad, so tight, so tense, and they're so getting in the way of that child latching and breastfeeding and sleeping and airway breathing and nervous system regulating. Because what's more important to nervous system regulation for an infant than co-regulation, breastfeeding, latching, calming, digestion, and sleeping and airway breathing? Like, that's it. Nutrition, breathing, and being with mom and dad and being connected and being able to sleep. Like, those are 3 of the 4 most essential by far life functions. So if a tongue tie and oral ties get in the way of that and they clip them and those things get better instantly, that's awesome. That's to be celebrated. And I hate to be the doomsdayer, and this is just the way the world works right now. Us as PX doctors and pediatric chiropractors, we have to be, and I wish you knew, if you know me at all, you know how much I hate the 2 words I'm about to use. Like, I despise these 2 words. These 2 words are, yeah, but. I've actually probably addressed this because it's such a big thing for me, my kids, my family, my team. I lead my team this way. I'm like, nope, we don't make excuses. We solve problems, okay? We take responsibility. I lead my kids that way. So yeah, but is that, yeah, I agree with you, but I disagree with you, right? It's kind of a funny little phrase where as soon as you say but, you dismiss everything you actually agreed to or took responsibility before. So the best comp here is when my kids go, but, or well, or if you really want to get after it, yeah, but, they're just going to put the blame on somebody else, right? And so that's this conversation. Where does the blame, we'll use that term, we're going to run this out. Where does the blame really go for the foundational root cause of tongue ties and that tension that's on those soft tissues? And the truth is, what happens for a lot of kiddos, and we see this because we take care of our patients not only over a short time frame, but we take care of them often for their entire lifetime, okay? I have kids that I've adjusted, oh my gosh, I'm about to say this out loud because it's true. I've been in practice 17 years. So some of and actually they started as like an infant. I've got some of my first patients going off to college. My daughter will be going off to college in a year and a half, right? So long story short, we get to see not just the short-term change or benefit from different interventions, and especially today we're talking about tongue tie revisions, but hang with me because we get to see what really happens down the road. And what really happens for the majority of cases is that tissue tightens back up. Those challenges return. So let's go through 4, and I have them on list. I'm going to call them what I see them neuroscientifically and from practice-based experience, what they are. I've looked into this issue again and again, and I look deeper because we look with a different lens and we look down a different road and we have a different level of expertise as nervous system focused doctors than even pediatric dentists, holistic pediatricians, and others. Like, we just have a depth of understanding about root cause and nervous system that's different than others. So this isn't meant to be a controversial episode. This is meant to be a contrast and depth episode, like every episode of this podcast, to say, there's probably more going on, okay? So the myths are that it's just a mechanical problem and it's just a tight frenulum. And if you can just get rid of the mechanical obstructive problem, that the problem will go away and stay away. But the reality is, the real root cause, and I'm gonna go real deep on this, so I'm gonna intro it here through these myths, and then we're going to get into the neuroscience of what's really causing tongue ties to be there. It's a neurological issue. It's a deeper neurological dysautonomia, so altered tone, and the nervous system, the operational, think of it literally like the operating system on your computer, on your phone, it has a certain tone to it, okay? And if that tone is wound up and sympathetic dominant and what's called subluxated, dysregulated, and dysautonomic, you can fix the mechanical sequelae, a downstream issue from that, but the issue will return if you didn't root out the actual nervous system problem. So it's not just a mechanical frenulum tightness kind of structural tissue problem. Number 2, the quick laser, scissors, fixes everything. It'll fix everything for a season because the nervous system is brilliant. So I didn't really finish running this out. The nervous system loves to catch its breath. Literally, in this case, it'll help breathing, okay? So when you clip a tongue tie, the nervous system has been battling so much, it's honestly like taking a Tylenol. It's honestly like eustachian tubes. It's going to make that particular specific function better for a season. But parents, I need you, and so many of you are going to relate to this because you're going to go, yeah, actually, we were good for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden, their sleep started to get funky again. Then all of a sudden they started to get congested again. Then all of a sudden their sensory issues started to return again. Then all of a sudden latching and nursing and swallowing started to be problematic again because the revision, whether laser, however they do it, it can only handle the tissue issue, okay? And in fact, a lot of times what we know, okay, I was gonna say, I just said a lot of times, I didn't actually mean it. What we know is that the tension on the tissues is actually a compensatory mechanism of neurological protection from neurological dysfunction. So the way the body works is the body is brilliant and the nervous system works in this flowchart. Whenever there is a problem, whenever there is a subluxation or a dysfunction, the body will create a compensation to that subluxation and tension in order to protect itself from further damage. I need you to hear this. I need you to know this. It's actually really, really brilliant. And it's like, that kind of creates the perfect storm. That kind of creates a vicious cycle because now compensations like tongue and oral ties, like primitive reflexes, and like inflammation, because inflammation is actually a natural physiological reaction to an unnatural dysfunctional problem within the body, okay? And so what happens is downstream, these compensatory protective mechanisms are put into the tissues because the nervous system is stressed. The nervous system is in fight or flight. The nervous system then goes into a status of tension. And neurological tone dictates soft tissue tone. So again, if it's just a quick release, but the nervous system tension and dysfunction isn't addressed, the symptoms will perhaps go away for a little bit, but they often return. We've had so many patients, just like we've seen kids get 2 or 3 or 4 sets of ear tubes, we've seen kids get their tongue and oral ties revised 3 to 4 different times. How can a dentist, how can anybody tell a parent to do that? How can you run into the same wall 3 times, And as a dentist, as whoever's recommending parents to do this, not find the truth for these parents and then give it to them. So I'm so glad I get to have this podcast. I'm so glad this question came in through the platform again and again. It comes in a lot, and I've done one episode on this, but I actually went back. I saw the question come in a lot again over this last couple of weeks, and I went back and I listened. Oh, by the way, that was the worst. You want to talk about sympathetic dominance and really stressing your nervous system. When you are me and you talk 1,000,000 miles an hour and you go into all these random tangents and sidetracks that aren't really sidetracked at all, and you try and bring it back around and tie it all together, when you have to listen to yourself, that is really, really stressful. You guys are incredibly adaptable, resilient humans for falling in love with this podcast and this platform like you have. I love you for it. You are tough people, okay? So anyways, I love you people so dang much, and I love helping your kids so much, and I love getting you the full truth so much. I went back and I looked at my article. I looked at my outline and my notes that I used for that previous episode on tongue ties, and I listened to it as well, as painful as it is to listen to yourself. I listened to myself on 1.5 speed, by the way. Keep up. And because I was like, let's get this over with. Long story short, see, that's that too. That's a tell. I wanted to go in more depth. I didn't feel like I hit the myths and the misnomers about tongue ties enough, and I want to go a little bit more into this, a good bit more into the science than I did. Okay, myth number 3. If a baby has trouble latching, it's just a tongue and mouth issue. Oh boy, this is a big myth. This is a big misconception because breastfeeding, latching, nursing, co-regulating is such a very, it's so beautiful. It's so designed by God. It's unbelievable when you think about how God designed conception to growing a baby, to delivering a baby, to mom, nursing and latching and feeding and all the nutrition. And there's literally generations of antibiotics, generations of wisdom and intelligence and nutrition. It even changes, the beginning days and weeks have different nutritional formulations to it than they do later on. Not only is it the nutritional connection, it's the neurological connection. And oh, by the way, while all this amazingness is happening, and yes, if there's subluxation, nervous system dysfunction, and these sons of guns, tongue ties in the way, that most awesome essential component of life becomes more difficult, which is why we're talking about it. But I just want you to know as a dude, we're just going, man, what good are we? Honestly, we're trying. If you ever notice your husband and dads, does it ever feel like we're trying too hard? Well, give us a break. Do you know how much we have to make up for? Do you know how much we didn't do to bring children into the world and freaking breastfeed them and give them nutrition? And then if you know even a little bit about co-regulation that comes from breastfeeding and latching and bonding and skin to skin, at least we now know for dudes, we get to go skin. I'll never forget those moments with my kids when they're taking naps on me, skin to skin. We're just chilling, as talk about a dude, my favorite things to do were watch a sports game or something and have our infant sleeping on me. My nervous system remembers those moments right now because that was co-regulation and neurological connection. And I went on a rant there, but it's a good one. Breastfeeding and latching is extremely complicated and intricate and multifaceted to happen. It looks beautiful and simple on the outside because it is in that frame. But when you actually break it down and we understand the neurobiomechanical reflex, connection, and coordination, that's the best word for this, the coordination between baby's nervous system and mama's nervous system, what we need to know is that when subluxation is at play, subluxation creates sympathetic dominance, neurological tension on the entire body. The entire nervous system, the nervous system controls every single tissue, organ, gland, and function of the body. And so when subluxation, dysautonomia, dysregulation, and sympathetic dominance are there, especially when it's in the upper neck. The first thing it messes with is breastfeeding, latching, and swallowing. And so often what breaks our hearts as perinatal, pediatric, and family chiropractors is we know that this breastfeeding connection is co-regulation and it's a two-step tango, and the baby's nervous system needs to be subluxation and stress and dysfunction and mechanical obstruction free. All the things need to be out of the way because the baby's function has a lot more to do with the success of breastfeeding than often even moms. And moms are misled and mistakenly blamed for breastfeeding. Oh, it's my latch, or it's my letdown, or it's this, and it's just, or it's my anatomy. And it's so heartbreaking because honestly, of course, everything is at play with breastfeeding. That's what I'm talking about right here. But the truth is the baby's neurological function or dysfunction for this conversation is generally what's getting in the way of the latch, the reflex, the connection, and the coordination. So the tongue tie, the tension on the tissues, and the mechanical, soft tissue obstruction that is more easy to kind of see and check and test out, it's actually the superficial visual presentation of what's lying beneath the surface, which is neurological tension, subluxation, dysautonomia, and sympathetic dominance, which is also saying vagus nerve dysfunction, so lack of calming, connecting, regulating, digesting tone. And that's actually the issue. But you know why it's so hard to find? Because you literally can't see it. You can't test for this mechanically. You can to a degree, but we have to test for this through technology, through our insight scans. You have to test through this through training and understanding that if there was perfect storm, high stress pregnancy, labor, birth, interventions, forceps, vacuum, cord wrap, C-section, induction, and there's neurological dysfunction, subluxation, you got to check the neck for that. You got to check the cranial bones for that. You got to often check even the palate for that. And if there's subluxation and neurological discoordination and obstruction in there, it will lead to a tongue tie, but the tongue tie is B, not A. And so if you fix B, you'll have a couple moments or a season of better, but then that child is still heading towards the perfect storm. That child is still heading towards neurodevelopmental delays, sensory issues, speech challenges, sleep challenges, breathing and airway issues. If the subluxation isn't addressed, it's coming back. It's coming for more. And again, I hate to be the doomsdayer, but that's how this works. So myth number 4, so you can see I'm kind of dancing into the myths and then going into the actual solution in science. And myth number 4 is, and you maybe know a lot about this topic and you're wondering why I've talked for this long and not brought this into the conversation. Isn't a folate nutritional deficiency, MTHFR mutation conversation, isn't that what's really causing them? That's a ride-along problem, okay? You probably can guess where I'm going. Yes, it's part of the problem. No, it's not the entire problem, okay? If it was, especially knowing about the level of mutations and detoxification, then again, we got to look at that and say, why is our genetic pathway? Why are these happening so often? Why is detoxification? Subluxation sets up shop before birth, okay? Sympathetic dominance can set up before birth. We now know epigenetics. But if it was really just the nutritional deficiencies and the folate problem, we'd have a much more consistent and predictable rate of tongue ties. Whereas what we know is they vary widely between children. Now, I have never in my practice, and nobody watches for pattern connections like us. Like we are so militant about drawing out all these connections. We track stuff at a level. If you're a patient of ours or a patient of a PX doc, you've never met a doctor who works with such depth, right? And literally tracks everything, asks everything. We always like to joke, we're the annoying toddler doctor. We ask more questions because we're looking for more depth and more connections and more what are called clinical patterns than anybody else. It's actually the essence of our work. It's the foundation of our work. The best doctors go deep. The best doctors are great at pattern recognition. That's how you find root cause. So what I'm telling you is we've checked, okay, tongue tie, this kid has got a serious one. This kid has got a lot of challenges. Let's look at MTHR. Let's look at functional testing. Does it math out? Doesn't always math out. You know what it does? When kids have severe, significant, and quite a bit of presence of tongue and oral ties, they always have had a high stress pregnancy or birth intervention, okay? Not always both. And when you look at birth intervention and you consider stress there, it's so hard, mom and dad, to really see and pick up what we're talking about because everybody in the medical system in this world has normalized all that. That this yanking out our kids, by their head and neck, getting hold, which is what controls their jaw, and even having hands on the jaw, and then even having hands on the sphenoid and on the frontal, and literally mashing, twisting, and pulling. Of course, that's going to cause a mechanical, structural, soft tissue issue. And yes, that's going to also stress out the nervous system, which is then going to continue to cause the mechanical soft tissue issue. And so we have to address it all. So rounding third base with this one, what I want you to know is tongue ties are nasty. Oral ties are real. This TOTs conversation, tethered oral, it's a real conversation. These ligaments, these tissues, they shouldn't be that tight. They shouldn't be that tense. But there's more than fascia work that needs to be done. There's more than dental work that needs to be done. There's more than revisions that needs to be done. This is a multifaceted problem. The vast majority of the time, in my opinion, all of the time, to be honest, the tongue and oral tie is a secondary, compensatory, what's called sequela. It's a downstream issue from a primary dysfunction of subluxation. So just to review that, what the heck is subluxation? We taught it as we kind of went through the myths, but just to list it out again, subluxation and dysautonomia can come from way upstream. It can actually be present during in utero fetal development. So it can come from high stress during that in utero developmental, what's called critical or sensitive period. And then the biggest trigger of all this misalignment, subluxation, dysfunction, neurological tension, dysautonomia comes from birth. So forceps, vacuum, cord wrap, C-section, manual assistance, kiddo going sunny side up, birth taking, even the most natural born in a tub at home with a doula, Bob Marley burning, incense burning, and Bob Marley playing. That's how I like to kind of, perfect natural birth. My kiddos, one of them, Oliver, had a traumatic birth, very clearly traumatic. That's why he went into that storm and we got him out of it. My three girls had wonderful natural births. They were subluxated. They had upper cervical subluxations, very mild, and cranial subluxations, very mild. Had we left those subluxations and neurological tensions go, the tissues of the tongue and the jaw would have gotten tight as a result of the neurological dysfunction, because subluxation pushes forth sympathetic dominance. Sympathetic dominance is the same thing as saying as not enough relaxation and regulation. The upper cervical region is where the cranial nerves, like the vagus nerve and other what are called motor sensory nerves, go to the tongue and go to the tissues. So this is a nerve problem. Maybe I should have said it like that a long time ago. The soft tissue mechanical problem is not a soft tissue mechanical problem on its own. It's a nerve problem first. It's a wire that gets shorted. Specifically, we know how to find this in the upper cervical and the cranial system. When they get misaligned, they get fixated, they get tense, they get irritated, there's disruption of neurosensory communication. That's called subluxation. That triggers sympathetic dominance, dysautonomia, and vagus nerve exhaustion. We can find this. I literally have kiddos, we can just adjust their upper cervical and literally their face relaxes, their tongue relaxes, the tongue ties go away. We literally can address this from a neurological foundational issue. I just had a 4-year-old, he's only 3. His kid came in with all sorts of facial issues and asymmetries and tension and tongue and oral issues still there. And mom was like, do I have to get these? This has been a problem forever. We did 2 adjustments and his entire face relaxed. We didn't adjust his face. We didn't adjust his tongue. We didn't adjust his palate. We didn't do fascial restriction release on the tissues. We didn't mess with any of that because it's secondary and it's tertiary. And so this drives me crazy that chiropractors are telling you as parents, oh, the retained primitive reflexes or the tongue ties are the big deal. We address those and we're good to go. No, we're not. That's not true. If you meet a chiropractor that is telling you the tongue tie and oral tie and retained primitive reflexes, similar conversation but a different one, are the primary foundational issue, you need to get a different chiropractor who understands with more depth the actual neuroscience and root cause behind this conversation. I just have to be true. I owe it to you, your kids, and your family to not sugarcoat this, okay? I spent my whole career, just working right in the trenches with this, not just reading research and teaching others, serving patients, taking care of patients. We watch closer. We pay attention more than any other provider, even other chiropractors. Rant over. And so we know what is and we know what isn't, and we know when you're getting the complete story, and when we know when you're getting 3/4 of the story. And this is essential. Tongue ties are a son of a gun. And we have plenty of patients who we will do the work, we'll get the nervous system unwound, we'll start to make adjustments, we'll get in there to the central sensory nervous system, autonomic nervous system, we'll stimulate the vagus nerves, we'll release tension from the cranial nerves, we'll release tension from the sympathetic system. And you know what? Sometimes for some kids, because their stress and their pathway to get to that point was bad enough, and they're struggling enough with breastfeeding and latching and that connection, sometimes we'll say, hey, we need you to go see our pediatric dentist, homie, and have this revised. Or we'll say, hey, let's get some soft tissue work in there and start to try and work on it from that angle. And sometimes, a lot of times, we do it ourselves because we're really good at that stuff. We are multi-skilled. We do cranial work, we do SOT, we do myofunctional. Did you know that? You can go to your pediatric chiropractor and not have to go to 7 different people for 7 different things. You can go to one multi-trained, multifaceted badass. There, I said it. I do have a coffee mug given to us from our parents. It says, Hope Dealer Badass Subluxation Slayer, I believe. Maybe it doesn't say all of that, but in my mind, in my heart, it says all of that and then some. It says some of it for sure, but that is what we do. And if somebody wants to make that coffee mug and send it to us, I'm all about it. Probably not a shocker Crime Stopper, that I'm a pretty big coffee fan running at this state. Okay. Speaking of respiration, vagus nerve stimulation and nervous system regulation, I probably should learn how to do some of that myself during the podcast. But also, God made me this way to get you and your kiddos all the way, the truth, all the truth and everything to it. Okay, so that wound up state remains. The tissues will get tight again. So what do we do? Okay, fully, officially rounding third base. Does anybody listen to the podcast often enough to know, we actually just made a fun reel about this last night, that when I say long story short, I don't really mean it? Has anybody listened to the podcast long enough to know that when I say we're rounding third base, you're like, oh, he's just getting warmed up. So I just like to use these phrases to encourage you to stay connected to this conversation because there's more that can help your kids and families. Okay, so the solution is get to the foundation. If you see tongue and oral ties with your kid, if you're in that season right now, or you've had them revised and you're like, okay, did that fix everything? I hope this conversation gets you to understand you did the absolute right thing. You got to address these issues. When they're there, it's good to get them out of the way. You know what's gooder? Not always my English, but going deeper and getting even further into the root cause, which is nervous system. So there might be, for your family, post-revision or revisions, there might be more healing for your child. And that might be the answer as to why there's still more problems and more challenges despite these interventions kind of being sold to you as you do this, clouds will part and angels will sing. They might for a season, but what if that winds back up and the nervous system still is stressed and the problems keep coming from it? So what we do is we address subluxation, nervous system dysregulation, and dysautonomia with gentle, what are called neurotonal adjustments. So our adjustments work in 2 main forms. There's a lot more to them than this, but for this platform, I like to keep it simple. If I'm teaching chiro to chiro at our 80-hour certification and so many other things, we go deeper. But these 2 things happen. We have a certain level of technique that are called really light tonal adjustments that are designed to release sympathetic dominance, okay? So you can release neurological tension and you can also stimulate vagus nerve and neurological exhaustion. The other techniques that we use, so you're looking at it from either a slow it down and relax it or stimulate the vagus nerve and get it to go that way. There's also a huge component of our adjustments, which is very unique to our approach, which really addresses the asymmetries and the dysregulation and the discoordination issues within the system. So we adjust in a very nervous system balancing, nervous system regulation promoting manner, but we also very much use what are called neurological reorganization techniques. And that's essential because once the system has been full of tension and it gets off track with its development, it becomes disorganized and we need to reorganize it. So our adjusting techniques involve those things and many more. We are really obsessed with vagus nerve activation. So we not only do this through our adjustments, but we will really, really help families do certain things or get them connected with other professionals who may need to step in and support to get respiration, to get vagus nerve activation, to get co-regulation. We're the biggest fans. Like, we'll really encourage you. We'll really almost kind of give you an at-home plan for nervous system regulation and co-regulation with your child, okay? You can think of it this way in closing. Instead of just addressing the visual, structural, soft tissue, compensatory problem that you can see, and it looks real granular, it looks real right there, right? It's a whole body problem. The whole nervous system is tight. The whole body is tight. The whole system. That's why kiddos who have tongue ties also have sensory and sleep issues, also have constipation and gut issues, also are colicky and fussy, also have meltdowns and tantrums later on in life, also end up with anxiety and autism, because it's not just the soft tissue mechanical issue. It's a whole body, brain, neurological tissue issue, okay? So the truth is, the biggest takeaways are to say it's not just a mouth problem, it's not just a mechanical problem, it's a nervous system issue. The real cause is subluxation, dysautonomia, and that excessive sympathetic tone, and then underactive, suppressed vagus nerve tone. When you get chiropractic care and nervous system work, when you really have a I'm going to close it in my way, a real baller, advanced, rock star, pediatric PX doctor, and all of us PX doctors, by the way, different levels of training and experience. I'm the old man on here, okay? So I've got a lot of tools in our toolkit. We've got 8 doctors at our office with a lot of experience, a lot of depth. So we're pretty well, equipped in that way. And other PX doctors are moving down those roads, okay? So what we can do all of the cranial work. We can do the fascial work. We do what's called neuromyofascial release. We can get in there. So you don't need to go to a myofunctional, special, you don't need to go to a cranial sacral therapist. You don't need to go to a fascial therapist. You don't need to get a bunch of different somatic or structural or soft tissue sort of people at play. If this is your child's problem or you want to find out if it is, you can get this all in one place with pediatric chiropractors. That's the cool thing about our training and our depth of services, all right? So if you've been told your child has a tongue tie, if you haven't had it revised, or you have, and then this conversation has you thinking, man, I think there's still sympathetic dominance, subluxation, nervous system dysregulation going on, reach out to us. If you haven't already connected with a PX doc, do so. And then those of you that have, remember, we do everything we can. I'll literally actually close this with this. As your family's pediatric and family chiropractor, I promise you this. Our tribe of PX docs, biggest freaking hearts ever. My kids, I don't know why my little girls call it this. Like whenever you say something smart, maybe this is a phrase that I have not picked up on, or maybe it's just an Ebel kid phrase, but they like to say big brained. Like if you really come up with something cool, you're big brained. I'd like to think that the biggest big brains in all of healthcare are pediatric chiropractors. We train them in a very big brain way. There's some weird evil terminology to give that to you. So putting all that together, I can't even tell you how much we try and make sure we're asking every single question we need to ask from you and address every single concern you have and check every single thing. And I'll also be real clear and real frank with you. It's a tough job. We want to do the greatest job ever. And if there's some part of the conversation or there's some question or some concern you have that you are already under care with your PX doctor and you haven't got your answers yet, ask them on the next visit, okay? Next time you're getting adjusted, be like, hey, can we have a tongue-tied chat? And again, you can blame me for this question. I've told our whole tribe, like, be ready for the most empowered, educated, question asking moms ever. Like, I know I'm part of this, absolute, I'm the catalyst and the impetus to this, and I love it. Get in there, ask them these questions, get into those conversations, attend their workshops. If your doc is doing a Perfect Storm workshop and locally, in person, we do our amazing webinars. You can watch the Why Are Our Kids So Sick replay. Just send us a DM. We'll send that to you. You can watch the Perfect Storm replay. We'll do another. We have a huge autism summit coming up in May. That will be released soon. You can't miss that, okay? We'll make sure it's all over the podcast. But I want you to just really get involved with your local PX doctor. I know many of you are already under care, and then you come here to keep learning more. I love it. Keep coming here. You're going to keep learning more. I got you. We got you. We're in this together. I'm on your team. What a blessing. What a cool spot I have to do that. But I don't get to sit knee to knee with you. I don't get to put my hands on your kiddo's nervous system and find out where their stress is, but I do get to train your docs and I do get to support your docs. And so I expect the most out of them, and I want you to as well. All right. Like, we got a really high. I already just earlier today, I mapped out my training for every first Tuesday of the month. I do a really in-depth training with them as part of their membership. They have to keep training to stay on the directory. You don't just get to take the class once and 7 years later still be there listed as a trusted source for your family. You got to stay on the latest neuroscience and clinical techniques and research as a PX doctor to stay on the directory. So please trust it to the nth degree. And so I already mapped out my training for them, and it's about the 10 lessons we learned last year to improve our clinical results even more. And so we're going to take this into that depth. And you know what I find all the time helps me massively find the things I need to know as my patient's pediatric chiropractor? Chat with mom and dad, answering your questions. The questions you ask get our brain thinking with greater depth and greater clarity. And so we're in that in partnership with you. So long rant here to close this one out, but I think it's super important as parents, get in there with our PX docs, keep asking questions, keep, sending them messages, keep going to their workshops. Like, this is what we love to do. As a chiropractor, we love two things: talking about chiropractic and the nervous system and hope dealing and subluxation and how awesome the adjustment and chiropractic care is and natural health and healing and drug-free healing is. We love talking about it, and then we love delivering it. We love adjusting. Most chiropractors, after that, you find out what else you love. I really love chiropractic. Okay? It's just how God made us. So tap into it. Full send, full steam. All right, everybody. Remember, your child's body and nervous system are wildly intelligent. That tongue tie, that oral tie, could very well be there as a compensation, not a primary root cause problem. And so the revision may give you a season of relief, but not full and complete relief. So expect miracles always. You're going to experience them most with nervous system focused chiropractic care and just nervous system regulation leading the way. Then you add in natural health, holistic health, functional and integrative health, and the kick-ass parenting and support and empowerment that you put into your kids and your family. Good night. These kids can just heal and transform and live incredible lives. And it is not easy. I'm a dad of 4 kids. We just had our holistic, shout out to Dr. Maggie. She's going to be coming on the podcast. We had our holistic dentist appointments today. And the reason we love Dr. Maggie Grothy is because she operates with such depth like we talk about here. And I'm not a pediatric dentist. And clearly it showed today because my kiddos need more depth. And so if you ever feel like I'm trying to do everything I can, and it feels like every time I learn one thing, there's another thing to learn, I'm right there with you. Frickin' A, right there with you. Walk in step as a parent. You're doing great. You're doing amazing. You're doing more than great. And I promise you're doing the job better than anybody else on earth can. And your kiddo will fully, completely, incredibly heal. They'll blow your mind. It's hard every day, but it's awesome when you see the big picture. So work hard every day to keep raising healthy, resilient, happy kids, but also enjoy the heck out of it. Be just so much kinder to yourself and let yourself know how damn good you're doing at it. All right, I'll shut up now. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Do you have a question that you would like to submit? Either send it to support@pxdocs.com with the subject Ask Dr. Tony, or head on over to our socials @pxdocs, where you can submit your question in our stories every single week. Every kid counts and every family counts, so let's leave no questions left unanswered. If you loved this episode and you want to help us reach more kids, we would so appreciate if you left a review and a rating on your favorite platform. God bless, be well. We'll see you on the next one.